Thank you for tuning in to No Sudden Moves Radio. And remember, stay on the proven path so you don't risk falling behind. Here at Business Legends, we don't overthink it. Look around and see what everyone else is doing. If it's working for them, it will work for you.
Welcome to Wait It Out, where we believe there's no reason to act now. The opportunity will still be there when the timing is better.
The age of disruption isn't coming, it's here. And the boldest move isn't following the crowd, it's following your why. I'm Patrick Leddin, and you're listening to Disruption Lab. Welcome to Disruption Lab Podcast. My name is Patrick Leddin, and in each episode, I have the chance to talk to you about disruption. You know what I mean? The curveballs, the things that catch you off guard, cause you to stop in your tracks, that make you feel like the ground is shifting right underneath you. I'm the author of the book, along with James Patterson, the book called Disrupt Everything and Win. It's a New York Times bestseller, which means it's getting in the hands of a lot of people. And our hope through that book and my hope through this podcast is to create a movement of people who are positive disruptors, who recognize that disruption is a natural course of life, but within those disruptions, sometimes there's fertile ground to do something amazing, to innovate, to progress, to throw fuel on the fire inside themselves, in their teams, and in their organizations. And today, I've got a guest who helps us do just that. I'm joined by Bob Chapman. He's the chairman and former CEO of Barry-Wehmiller, a more than $4 billion global industrial and packaging automation company that's become a case study in what happens when you put people first. Over the past few decades, Bob has led the company's transformation from traditional, numbers-driven leadership and management to what he calls truly human leadership, a people-centric approach built on the radical idea that every team member is somebody's precious child, entrusted to your care for 40 hours a week. That journey is captured in his Wall Street Journal bestselling book, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family, which he co-authored with Raj Sisodia. The book has just been re-released as a revised and expanded 10th anniversary copy, adding additionally 75 to 90 pages of new stories, lessons, and data from another decade of experimentation and impact. In our conversation, I want to explore with Bob the moment he shifted from traditional management to thinking to people first. What was that disruption moment? How did it impact him? And what has he learned along the way? Hey, Bob, thanks so much for joining me today.
I appreciate the opportunity to share a message.
I appreciate the opportunity to hear your message, and I know my listeners will as well. I had a chance before our conversation to do a little bit of research, read back through the book that I actually looked at a number of years ago. So I'm excited that there's a new edition. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I also started thinking about you and your career. And what I heard you talking about is that early on in your career, you were a little bit more focused on the numbers and efficiency and shareholder value, which arguably are important things. But then something shifted where you started to see people as somebody's precious child that are entrusted to your care. We would consider that kind of on our podcast, something disrupted, something changed. Can you take us back to it? Was it a moment like the light switch was thrown, or was it a dimmer switch, or what happened in your world, Bob, that started you to think a little bit differently?
I think for background for your listeners, I have an accounting degree from Indiana, MBA from Michigan. I went to Price Waterhouse. Very traditional business education, okay? And it's all about numbers, okay? It's about market share, earnings growth, organic growth, et cetera. And so when I got the opportunity to join our family business in 1969 and left Price Waterhouse, it was a pretty weak, old family business that was struggling, but I took it on as a challenge, and my dad was running the company. And for the first, until about 1997, I ran it with what I was taught and what I experienced. It's about numbers, it's about growth, it's about share price, it's about cash flow. It's a numbers game. And the lens through which I saw people in our organization I saw them as a function for my success. I was the nice guy, but I saw them as engineers, accountants, machinists, union members, workforce, all those words we describe those people that we work with every day in kind of inhuman terms. So what happened is around 2000, I was at a wedding. The company was doing fine. I went through a big journey to get there, but the company was growing. I was doing fine. And I was at a wedding and I watched a friend of mine walk his daughter down the aisle. Traditional wedding, everybody oohed and ahhed how precious she looked, how delightful the young man was at the altar. And all of a sudden I had this disruptive experience. I call it a revelation. All of a sudden I said, oh my God, all 12,000 of our team members around the world are just like that young man and young lady. They're somebody's precious child that I have in my care for 40 hours a week. And if I am a good leader, I can have a profound impact on their life. And so the lens through which I saw people, prior to that wedding, I saw them as a function. I was a nice guy, we had a nice company, we were doing fine. But my lens changed at a wedding. And when you see people, so as somebody's precious child, you treat them differently than when you see them as a function. So that revelation that occurred to me changed everything for me, because it's profoundly more meaningful when you see people as somebody's precious child than as a function, and you use them. Because again, Tom Friedman wrote a beautiful article recently, not too long ago, that said we don't have a poverty of money in this country, we have a poverty of dignity. And when people feel used to achieve an organizational goal instead of cared for, you'll feel a sense of humiliation. And when you feel a sense of humiliation, you'll see anger and unrest like you've never seen before. So what are we seeing in this country? We are seeing anger and unrest in the most prosperous economy in our history. We have the highest level of anxiety and depression and suicide we've ever had, because we don't know how to care for each other. We're taught to use people to achieve goals, not to care for people to achieve goals. So that was the revelation that changed everything for me.
Well, we've heard people talk about over the years, and maybe from your own accounting perspective, you think about this as well, is that oftentimes when we think about people versus equipment, for example, one is an asset and the other one's a cost. And there's something about that kind of mindset that sticks with us. I'm wondering, there's an expression that says the mind once expanded can never go back to what it once was. And if you're sitting at the wedding and your mind kind of expands, you have this moment where you all of a sudden see something different. Is there something that kind of old Bob needed to unlearn in order to start behaving differently?
I wouldn't say I unlearned anything. I would say I grew dramatically, okay? Because, again, I don't want anybody listening to this get the message. We decided to care for people and we forgot about financial performance, because again, we call it people, purpose, and performance. It starts with our foundational responsibility, the people we have the privilege of leading, knowing that the way we lead them will profoundly affect their health and the way they go home and treat their spouse and their kids, around a purpose that inspires them to share their gifts towards our common vision. And then we got to create value, human and economic value, because if we fail to create value in alignment with the expectations of our team members, our stakeholders, our bankers, we will hurt people. So again, people, purpose, and performance. So I just needed this people side. I just needed to change. And the beauty is we were doing well, growing nicely before that as I transitioned the business. But the curve just bent up more when we started caring for people. We didn't do it to improve our performance. We did it because we saw these people and we wanted them to go home each night knowing that who they are and what they did matters. And we did. The talent we attracted, the way people shared their gifts, the way they cared for each other, those were all benefits from the lens through which we saw people.
I would imagine that there's some people who might say, I hear what Bob's saying. Like, I know I should think about people, process, and performance, but right now I don't have the luxury to do that. I'm so focused on performance. We're not performing well, except what would you say to somebody who's kind of like, I'm just going to keep the pedal to the metal for a while and then deal with that people stuff a little bit later?
I'd say that's sad. That's sad. I years ago learned that leaders always have time for what's important. For somebody to say to me, I don't have time to care for the people I have the privilege of leading, then you should step aside because, okay, it is unacceptable. Everybody has time to care. What they don't have is the skills to care, okay? So it's like a foreign language. So I would say to you, we don't have to, some people say to me, how do you justify this investment of time and leadership towards caring? I said, I don't need to justify caring. How do you justify not caring? When you see the anxiety and depression, 88% of all people feel they work for a company and care about them. When you see the statistics about what's happening to our country as we seek financial success without human success. So disconnect. So I would say to any leader, don't tell me you don't have time. You have time because that is your foundation. It's kind of like saying, I don't have time to care for my family because I got to work. That would be unacceptable, okay? We all have time to balance. So again, the beauty is that if you get, when you get this right, everything else works. Because if you have a good business model and a culture of caring, you can sit back and you have time for a lot of things because you've got a good vision for where you're going and you've inspired people to join that vision and to make it real. So again, my personality that led to this, I was blessed with, despite my business background, I was blessed with a great deal of common sense, creativity, and a positive attitude. And if you blend those three together, you create this journey I've been on for this $20 million broken company that was 100 years old that I stepped into in 1969, that is now a $4 billion global company that Harvard wrote a case study on, that is used by 80 universities around the world to teach leadership, resulted in our book of Everybody Matters, which has sold over 110,000 copies. So the validation of this journey we're on is beyond any doubt. It's nobody has ever debated what I'm sharing with you. They just don't know how to go from using people to caring for people. They think it is a tough journey. It's the easiest journey. It's like feeding candy to kids. The reaction you will get from people when they feel cared for is profound. And remember, according to Gallup, 3 out of 4 people are disengaged in what they're doing. Because when you don't feel cared for, do you think you're going to give all your talents to the company or your team members? Or are you just going to do what you need to do a job? So that's the culture we have right now. People are getting laid off in organizations. They don't trust. Am I next? We really have a broken system right now. And we need voices like yours to awaken the inner spirit in people to see there's a higher calling for leadership than just producing results. And if done properly, it actually amplifies your results logically, right? And when people feel cared for, you attract better talent, they share their talents. So, and for example, our share price has gone up 12% a year compounded for 25 years, okay, in this journey. Why? Because when the attraction of talent, our customers love it. People work for each other, not just themselves, because they feel cared for, they feel more free to care for others. So, I mean, how could this kid from North St. Louis run a manufacturing company have created an organization through these revelations that the world is watching right now, that the world desperately needs to embrace to heal this poverty of dignity we have in this country?
Yeah, I can attest, in full disclosure, I've used your case study in teaching leadership at Vanderbilt, so I'm familiar with the story behind it, and I just love the chance to have a chance to talk to you about it, because it's a profound case study. It's a profound example of success by looking at things a little bit differently. You've argued in this conversation and elsewhere that we don't suffer a lack of money. We suffer a lack of dignity at work. At kind of on almost a personal level, but through your own lens, like how have you seen in your own organization changes in terms of people's well-being and mental health and a sense of meaning as truly human leadership has begun to take root?
We've been on this journey since 1997, and so we've got over 25 years of real-world experience, and again around the world. We're not just an American company. We have over 100 operations all over the world. And I would say to you, what I've seen and experienced in this journey is a sense of joy, okay? A real sense of joy. I have what I call global listening sessions. I'll get on a Zoom call, 25, 30 new team members, experienced team members, constantly different group, and say, this is what we're trying to do. How do you feel about it? And the feedback I get would bring tears to your eyes in terms of the healing power when people feel cared for. I mean, how can you debate, I don't mean you, how could anybody debate that organizations should be a place where people feel cared for? And an interesting example, Simon Sinek brought General Flynn, who wrote the foreword to his book, to our plant in Akron, Ohio. And he spent an entire day talking to our team members. He comes from military leadership development. He's very much aligned with Simon. At the end of the day, he sat down and said, Bob, what I experienced here was people describe this as a family. He said, no, they didn't describe it like a family. He said they described it as a family. And I said, well, General Flynn, none of these people are related to each other. They're not family members. And we had a robust, fabulous conversation. What we agreed was they used the word family because what does the word family mean in our language? The place of ultimate safety and care. When people describe where they work as a family, they don't mean that's my brother, my uncle, my brother. They mean I feel safe and valued. Shouldn't that be our goal when we have people in our care for 40 hours a week? Because again, in my education, I was never taught, ever, and nor in my experience in the world, that the way I would run Barry-Wehmiller would affect people's health, would affect people's marriage, and affect people's relationship with their children. 95% of the feedback we get from our journey to truly human leadership is how it affects their marriage and their relationship with their children. And the stories, we had a young lady in one of our plants the other day in a listening session say, Mr. Chapman, I've been here 6 months and I took your listening class at your university. And she said, I'm a single mother with 2 kids and I now realize I'm not a good mother. Can you imagine that journey of a 3-day class that she realized at a company she's working at, that she could be a better steward of these 2 precious lives that came into her life through birth? So the feedback we get, the stories we get from Serbia to China to Italy to Germany are unbelievably fulfilling and meaningful. There is no question we have been blessed with the vision of the way the world was meant to be, where people genuinely care for each other, not use each other, but care for each other.
Simon Sinek, when he wrote Leaders Eat Last, and he talks about General Flynn as kind of an inspiration behind that. Having been in the military myself and jumped out of planes for years, I also know that leaders jump first, because whenever we are on an airborne operation, the first person to go out the door is the most senior person, kind of a lead the way type of thing. From your perspective, as the leader of the organization, how has this journey impacted you in your own personal relationships?
Well, I would say to you, it's been profoundly meaningful to me because I was running a good business. I enjoyed it. I never considered it a job. It was a passion I had. I really loved trying to transform this old historic business, weak financially, old technology, to a company with a future. I loved the intellectual and challenge, and even the darkest days when we had no financing and we were near bankruptcy, I still enjoyed the challenge. So what it has meant is I sit here today at 80, having been CEO for 50 years. I have a profound sense of joy that I was blessed with the vision of the way the world was meant to be, and I had the ability to bring this through the book, through the TED Talk, through the opportunities like I am with you, to actually begin to heal the world. That sense, there's no Super Bowl championship, there's nothing. And it was capped off a couple of years ago, it's captured on the back of my book, a Harvard divinity professor who met me and interviewed me because he wanted me to speak to his class. and he's also an MBA professor. He read it. He interviewed me for an hour and a half, and at the end of the interview, he looked at me and said, "Bob, you are a true modern day prophet in the world."
Mhm.
Now, from my background, prophet is Profit, okay?
Yeah.
And I had to actually go up to my room and say, what is a prophet? I mean, I've heard the word, but I didn't. And a prophet is somebody who speaks the word of God.
Mm.
For this serious Harvard Divinity professor, also an MBA professor, who didn't know me at all until he interviewed me for an hour and a half to say, because that's the way I feel. There's no way from my background I would be on a journey to transform the world the way we see leadership. But somebody is using us to show the world the way it's meant to be, not the way it is. And so the feeling of joy in my heart to know that I have a chance to heal the world, to prevent a lot of the anxiety and depression and suicide that's happening, to create a sense of joy for people as they share their gifts. Words can't express how that feels.
Well, as a writer myself, I know the journey of writing a book can be a challenge. And it's also really rewarding, but it's a challenge. And you and Raj Sisodia took the challenge on a while back, writing Everybody Matters, which just recently came out at its 10-year anniversary. I also know that a lot of books, especially business books, it's great if you sell 5,000 copies.
Right.
Maybe 10, 15,000, you're doing pretty well, but you're in the six figures now, probably growing towards seven before we know it. And I'm just curious, when you were writing that book, who did you see picking it up and using it? And is that who the audience ended up being?
Probably 13 years ago, a editor at Penguin who met me through Simon Sinek said, and heard our mess, he said, "Bob, you're going to write a book someday." I said, "I'm not going to write a book. I'm an accountant. I can't write a book." And about a year or two later, a guy named Srikumar Rao, who is a contributing editor to major business magazines, he came in because he'd heard about it. And he spent 2 days talking to our people, and he looked at me and he said, "Bob, I've interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of CEOs. I have never seen anything like this. You have got to write this and share this with the world." That moved me from there's no way I would do that to I need to find a way. And and what we decided was that we wanted this book to become a textbook to teach leadership at our universities and schools. Okay, that it's a and so technically the book, according to Raj, who had written 10 books I think at the time, the first third of the book is called technically The Hero's Journey. How did I go from management to leadership? So my journey to where we got to. And then the second 2/3 of the book is how to do it. How do you implement this idea of caring for others? And then the anniversary edition we just came out with, because we realized about a year ago that the book had done massively better than our wildest expectation, okay? It's around the world in 6 languages. But we have learned so much in the 10 years since we published it that we owed it to the world to capture our learnings, the impact of we can tell you how I got there and how to do it, but what's the impact? And so that we spent a year writing 5 chapters and tweaking the original book to come out with the anniversary edition in the hopes that this book would be a foundational book used to teach leadership in education.
I was telling the listeners on the front end about the new edition, the expansion, the number of pages added, but more than that, the number of stories and lessons learned. And and I think back, you mentioned your career from 1969 or so until today, Bob, and I don't know, we've been in a pretty unprecedented last 10 years, right? Economic turbulence, pandemic, social unrest, a new wave of technology that seems to be disrupting everything. But at the same time, I hear a lot of conversation about what does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to be a person these days? We're hearing a lot about AI, and people are saying, well, people will do things that are uniquely human because that's what we'll do, and AI will do everything else. And people are saying, well, what does that even mean? Do you see any any hope? Put that prophet hat back on. Do you see any hope in the face of all this turmoil that actually there's an ear out there willing to listen to the idea that, you know what, we need to see people as people and we are precious children.
You know, I feel a little bit like standing on the beach in the South Pacific and a tsunami wave is heading towards me. And I said, "Don't worry, we're gonna be able to handle it." The we have a world very focused on success being money, power, and position. Whether you're the president of the United States or president of a company or president of a university, a numbers-oriented society around the world. Okay, and the key to me is, and so I have a lot of hope having given this speech in all parts of society. Again, when I speak in healthcare, I speak in education, I speak in the military, I speak globally, 300 speeches the last few years in every part of society. And the reaction is always profound. I mean, standing ovations, people, because it gives people hope.
Yeah.
That I've been dealing with disruptions, from automated machine tools to replace 5 people that now can be done with 1, to, fax machines, to iPhones, lots of things that have been disruptive. AI is just another significant advance in technology that, people worry about. But again, I've watched this. So to me, it elevates the potential of us as humans to be able to capture and use technology for good. I know AI hopefully is going to help us cure cancer because it can simulate information. So I have never been more hopeful because the reaction to our, just the Harvard case study being taught all over the world, the 110,000 books being sold, speeches, the interest in our message is the world is desperate for hope. And I believe that, the way I sign my book every time I do it is there is hope. That we can create a society, but leaders are going to constantly have to adapt to the changes in markets. I always tell senior leaders, your primary responsibility is make sure you have a business model that is robust, that your people have a future. So when you invite people into your organization, they feel safe in your care and can plan their personal life, to raise a family, to buy a home, to educate their kids, because they can trust you. And I see a lot of remember, we have the most prosperous economy in our history. We have a record stock market, and we have a record year of layoffs going on this year. Tremendous number of layoffs. And they're blaming it on AI and all these things. Those are just PR-related ways of saying, we want to improve our profitability because the shareholders will like it. And so with public relations team members, they use all these words. Oh, we're going to blame it on AI. We won't need as many people. Okay. Basically, we got a broken system that we use people to achieve numbers and we discard them to do that. So it's a really broken system. And I don't blame people. It's, record level of anxiety and depression. Why would you want your kids to get a job in today's world when there's a 88% chance they're going to work for a company that doesn't care about them? Why would you want your kids to get a job? Why do you want your kids to graduate from Vanderbilt if you know they're going to go out into a broken world? So we got to deal with the foundation that we need to create a world where people matter, where people feel valued, where people go home at night knowing that they have a future and they feel cared for, and it allows them to have a better marriage. The kids will watch the behavior of their parents and learn from it. So, I mean, this is foundational to creating a world where everybody matters. Whether you're a receptionist or a CEO or a machinist or assembler, you simply want to know they matter. And that is something that is teachable. You cannot ask people to care. You need to teach them how to. Teaching, like language, is a teachable skill. And that's what we've learned.
Yeah, I've heard it said before that if you want your employees to be more engaged in their work, being creatively excited about their work, you need to get them to be able to answer this or say yes to this statement. I'm a valued member of a winning team doing meaningful work in an environment of trust. And what I hear you talk about today, it really allows people to say, yes, that's who I am. I'm valued. We're winning. I'm a member of this team. We're doing stuff that matters. And trust is so critical because I trust that the competence and I have confidence in my leadership and my team members that they're going to be both high character and high competence, which is really critical. If there's somebody listening to this right now that goes, I get what Bob's saying. I've been kind of managing things, not leading people per se. And I'd like to start to turn the corner. What would you say if you're talking to that person over a cup of coffee or whatever your favorite drink is, Bob, and you're like, all right, Monday morning, just do this. What would you say is like, here's a way to get started?
Well, the way you got to get started is, when I gave my Simon Sinek Academy gave a TED talk, about 2013, I think it was, and it's since been animated. So there's like a 10-minute version of my 20-minute TED talk. So just go to the internet and look up this animated TED talk and say, does this resonate with me? Does this resonate with me? Then you can decide to read the book, which is a how-to book, okay? And then we have the Leadership Institute. There's all kinds of media availability of our message. We're not trying to sell anybody anything. We are trying to invite people to join us on this journey of healing. And so, again, take steps. We don't need to flip a switch. Take steps intentionally. How do you align with this? All I can say to you is that you should not be a leader if you don't do this, because you're hurting the very people that you think, because you pay them a good salary and good benefits, that you're doing good to society. We have a broken system because we don't know how to care for people. And again, when people come into our company and say they've never seen anything like this, how is that possible? Because we've been blessed with a vision of the way the world was meant to be, where people actually come together, share their gifts, go home at night feeling valued, and treat their family and their children and their communities right. And we could heal so much of the issues we have in this country. I mean, some people say to me, how do you justify these initiatives to care? I said, I don't need to justify caring. How do you justify not caring about your people? Well, I pay them well and they don't work very hard. Well, maybe it's not them. Maybe it's your leadership model. Maybe they don't feel valued, because when people feel valued, they share exponentially their gifts, not just for themselves, but for their fellow team members to create a future. So, I mean, the beauty, I'm not a professor with an academic theory. What we are simply sharing is what we're doing in a 12,000 person global firm that has created 12% a year compound growth in our share value, that is being written about all over the world as a model of what business could be, a force for good, by caring for the people they have the privilege of leading.
Well, Bob, I appreciate you taking the time to care enough to share some ideas with us today. Actually, I sign off on my emails these days with "Go disrupt for good," and there's a double meaning to it. But I remember years ago when I had our business, and we were not by comparison, anything like what you had, but we had double-digit growth every year for 12 years, and we were doing really well. And I remember toward the end, before we exited the business, my mom passed away. And my family lived up in Chicago, and I went back to Chicago for the funeral. And as I stepped out of the church that day after the funeral was over, I looked across the small gathering that was there, and I saw a face I didn't expect to see. It was one of my employees that, on his own dime, on his own time, flew out from our office in DC to go to that funeral, to be there for me. And the funny thing is, did I treat him a certain way because I hoped that someday he would do that? Of course not. I couldn't even envision that. I treated him a certain way because, at least in my world, I was taught, as a leader, you check soldiers' feet and you make sure that everything's okay at home. And not that I could give you a long list of people who would tell you all the ways I screwed it up. But I do think that what you're talking about is so true, just from a personal experience level. And I appreciate you taking the time to come and chat with us about it today.
I appreciate you sharing the message, because the world desperately needs to have hope that we can come together, work together, and go home feeling valued and heal this poverty of dignity that is destroying lives. Because the number one source of happiness in the world is a good job doing meaningful work with people you enjoy. And we don't need government, we don't need taxes. We as leaders need to look at the people that we have the privilege of leading and treat them with respect and dignity, and learn how to care, not say we do care, but learn the foundation of caring to give them a better future. So you give me hope. Thank you for the opportunity to share this message with you, and I look forward to other opportunities we'll have in the future.
Thanks, Bob. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Well, folks, that's all we have for today's episode. Big thanks to Bob Chapman for joining me to talk about the insights he's gained over the last 50 years of leading his organization and the insights in his book, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family, which is now in a revised 10th edition with new stories, new data, and new practical tools. I know life is full of disruptions, but I also know you have the ability to handle those disruptions. You have big brains, you have great experiences, and you have tremendous resources. And I suggest you add Everybody Matters to that list of resources you have available. That's all I have for today. My name's Dr. Patrick Leddin. Now go disrupt something for good.